Welcome here this evening. It's good to see you all here today. Basically about 3 years ago, the reason that I set up this workshop was I decided I needed to do a workshop on ADHD and to help people to make better choices. And so I started doing some research on the internet and went through the scientific journals and literature and got more and more embedded in the information that was out there. And literally it got to the point where we now have this workshop that we're presenting tonight. So this is the information I have here in front of me here this is the good stuff that I found on the journals and the internet. So there's a lot of information out there and there's a lot of conflicting information. So what I'm trying to do tonight is basically give you a package, explain to you the conventional ways of doing things, and also look at some alternative solutions so that you can make some good choices. So it's a big choice for any parent, whether it be ADHD, whether it be someone with Asperger's or autism, any of the behavioural problems. It's really a hard choice when you're deciding whether or not to medicate. So what we're going to be looking at tonight is we'll look at quite a lot of information. We're going to be looking at what is ADHD. We'll look at some of the conflicting information that's out there in terms of understanding what it even is. How is it diagnosed? We're going to be looking at the different methods that are used to diagnose ADHD or ADD. What causes it? We're going to try and figure out whether there are reasonable and understandable causes of this problem. And we'll be looking at the conventional treatments, and then we'll also be going into some natural options. So basically what I try to give you tonight is a smorgasbord of information that allows you to perhaps manage your child better, or perhaps make some decisions that you haven't been able to make. And then obviously I'll try to put it all together at the end of the night and give you some sort of a package that allows you to put all of this information together. So ADHD, what is it? Basically there's three behaviours that characterise a child with ADHD. Inappropriate impulsivity, which is impulsive behaviours. Any parent who has one of these children will know exactly what that is. Inattention, the inability to attend to what's in front of them, and in some cases hyperactivity. We know that it affects somewhere around about 5% of children, but we'll look at that a little bit later. There's some conflicting statistics even on how many people actually suffer with this problem. They are behaviours which are long-lasting, and they do arise in early childhood, so they're not something that just appears as a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. They are something that's is fairly consistent and goes through a child's life, perhaps even into adulthood, as we'll see. There's three classifications or three main types that the experts talk about. We've got the inattentive type, we have the hyperactive or the impulsive type. So they almost seem like opposites of a spectrum, don't they, in terms of behaviour? But then you can also get the combined type, where you've literally got these three behaviours all mixing in together. So what's in the name? ADHD, obviously people say to me, I didn't hear of ADHD when my kids were going to school, or when I was a child I'd never heard of ADHD. So over the years it's evolved in terms of the names that they've used to define what it is. Obviously the current terminology is attention deficit disorder with or without hyperactivity. It's also been called hyperkinetic reaction of childhood, hyperkinetic syndrome, hyperactive child syndrome, minimal brain damage, going back through the years, minimal brain dysfunction, minimal cerebral dysfunction, minor cerebral dysfunction. So it's changed in its names, and you can almost see how some of these names are influenced almost by the theories of what actually caused the problem at a particular time in the past. So how many people have ADHD? It's a controversial sort of a question. A recent review, this is from the National ADD Association, which is one of the major associations in the USA. A recent review of 13 community studies of the prevalence of ADHD indicated that between 1.7 to 16% of children have ADHD, And that depended upon the populations that they were measuring and the diagnostic methods. As we'll see, we'll understand why that is. You can get such a wide range of potential children who have this problem. For example, I was just talking to a professional yesterday who's works with kids in Geelong, and she said that Nor Lane in Geelong is actually the highest percentage of medicated children in the whole of Australia. And the real idiosyncrasies of that area is that it's a very small area and it's a very specific socio-demographic kind of an area, and it's also a very, most of the kids go to one educational institution. So we have this rather unusual area where there's, I've heard that there's perhaps 25% of the kids in that area are medicated for ADHD. So there's opposing views. It gets quite controversial. Whenever I say to people that I'm doing a talk on ADHD, the two responses are either, do you really think it exists, or is it just bad kids? Or the other alternative is people say, well, yeah, I know what it's all about. I know that my kid has it, and etc. So there's almost two extremes, and that's even what you find when you start listening to the experts on the topic. Back in 1987, the American Psychiatric Association, every year they get together and they classify all of the different mental illnesses, and this was the very first time that ADHD was actually classified as a mental illness. So this is a key point, that as you're looking at having a diagnosis of ADHD for your children, you have to accept that in medical scientific terms, what you're accepting is, a label of a mental illness, so to speak. The other extreme opinion, and this is a guy who literally specialises, a psychiatrist in the USA, is one of the best known specialists in the treatment of ADHD, and perhaps in the alternative treatment of ADHD. He basically says it's a bunch of behaviours that make it difficult to teach kids in a big classroom. And this is obviously the place where it's most noticed, is in a group setting, in a classroom setting. That's when people most notice the behaviours. So what is ADHD? This is Professor Richard Vatz, another one of the top specialists in the USA. The more you study ADD, the less certain you are as to what it is, or whether it is 1,000 different situations, all called by the same name. And that's what you'll often find if you put 12 kids with ADD in one room, you would literally see very different characteristics, very different behaviours. Another thing about ADHD that we're finding is it seems to be a bit of a characteristic illness of boys, perhaps more so than girls. ADD with hyperactivity and impulsivity is seen 3 to 10 times more frequently in boys than girls, and that 3 to 10 is obviously a big variation in numbers, but that basically depends once again on the studies and the populations and the classifying criteria that were used. This could be one reason why males are a bit more prone. This is a study of the way the human brain works. You can see some of the things that go on in a male brain. Obviously a major feature, particularly of an adult male brain, is a bit of an obsession on things about sex. But we've got some other classical little sections in your brain here. You've got dangerous and foolish pursuits, ability to find things in fridges and cupboards, the listening neuron, asking for directions micron, the food to fart converter, that's a good one, TV and remote control addiction centre, the lame excuse gland. It goes on. But that's almost, male brains are definitely wired differently to female brains, so you can almost see why we perhaps get labelled a bit more readily with ADHD. I think the whole male population may have a degree of it perhaps. So what causes ADHD? There's lots of different theories, there's lots of different information, there's lots of different research that's out there. Basically, the majority of research does suggest a neurobiological basis. So we're talking about something going on in the central nervous system, particularly the brain. Perhaps something chemical, perhaps something otherwise. But that's where most of the research is pointing to. Obviously, there's a genetic link. We do see traits through families, and as we'll see in a moment, we actually now know what the genetic link is for this particular syndrome. But the interesting thing is that even though this is actually one of the best researched disorders in medicine, the cause is still basically unknown. It's not a scientific fact as